I think it's officially fair to say that the Red Sox trade deadline has not aged very well. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and normally when we're talking about trades, it's tough to make a true proclamation about how a trade is worked out just a single month into the deal. Normally, you wait the full length of whatever contracts left on that player, you take a look at what the other players are doing for other teams before you make your official assessment, but sometimes it is clear as day that a trade did not work out, and right now, it is clear as day that the Red Sox trade deadline simply has not worked out to the point where it feels like a bit of a disaster. So what we are going to do in today's video is we're going to break down this deadline. We're going to revisit the moves the Red Sox made and why they have not worked out for this Red Sox team, including some very recent Red Sox news. But before we get into that, just a heads up, we're going to be live tonight on this channel, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Yes, we're still watching Red Sox games. Yes, we're still cheering them on. And yes, we're still talking about everything Red Sox related. That again will be tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time on this channel. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Okay, just for a real quick recap of who the Red Sox actually got at this year's deadline, they got 2 starters, Quinn Priester and James Paxton. They got 2 relievers, Luis Garcia and Lucas Sims, and they got a catcher, Danny Jansen. We're going to go through all of those guys and talk about what they've done for the Red Sox so far, and I think the best place to start should be with James Paxton, who statistically actually looked fairly decent for this Red Sox team. It was a 4.09 ERA and a 3.26 FIP in 11 innings and 3 starts with the big league club. That was slightly over league average production with an ERA plus just barely over 100, which for the Red Sox actually would have helped a whole lot, right? Having a league average starting pitcher in this rotation for the next couple of months could have been exactly what this Red Sox team needed. Unfortunately, though, this trade has not worked out because as of August 23rd, James Paxton has officially been transferred to the 60-day IL with a partially torn calf, essentially, without actually saying it, ending James Paxton's 2024 season. He will no longer be a factor for this Red Sox team. Now, specifically looking at this trade, this was a big fear of, I think, everyone's when this trade was made, right? We talked about it pretty quickly here in our video about this trade happening, that there was a lot of concern about James Paxton's health issues, and they came back to bite the Red Sox really, really quickly. But Corbin, that's just one bad deal. That happens. It happens from time to time. Well, let's take a look at the other players as well, because moving over to the bullpen with Lucas Sims, statistically, Sims has not been great for the Boston Red Sox. He's struggled on the mound with 9 runs allowed in 10 innings and the same amount of walks as he's had strikeouts at 7. Now, there were glimpses of a really solid reliever there. There were a few outings here where he came into some big situations and stranded some really important runners. In fact, with the 11 runners he inherited on the mound, he didn't let a single one of them score in those appearances. So there were some positives to take out of it. The problem is we have to talk in past tense here because as of yesterday, Lucas Sims has officially been placed on the 15-day IL with a right lat strain, which is not going to be a super easy injury to come back from. I would be pretty surprised if it only took him 15 days to get back to the Boston Red Sox, and with time winding down for the rest of the regular season here, I don't want to say that it could put an end to his 2024 season, but it absolutely is a possibility at this point, mostly because those lat strains tend to linger for a pretty long period of time. It tends to take at least a couple of weeks of just simply rest and rehabilitation before you get back onto the mound, and at that point, you're talking about him coming back basically mid-September as best case scenario. Now, the other piece of the Red Sox got, well, Luis Garcia, he's been even worse statistically for the Red Sox when he's been healthy. He had an ERA of 10.32 in 11 1/3 innings with a 6.08 FIP. However, I will say recently, he's been looking really solid. It looked like for a second there, things were really starting to turn around. In his last 3 innings or 3 appearances, Luis Garcia had a scoreless inning in every single one of them. It looked like he was really starting to put it together for the Red Sox and becoming a mainstay of this bullpen. Again, we have to use past tense here because like Lucas Sims, yesterday, Luis Garcia was added to the 15-day IL with right elbow inflammation, which is probably the worst thing you could hear from a pitcher going on to the injured list. Now, there are instances this season of Red Sox players coming back from elbow inflammation. Nick Pivetta earlier this season, Chris Martin came back from elbow inflammation. So there are guys who have had it and have come back during this season. The problem is, again, like Lucas Sims, it's probably going to take more than 15 days for him to get back here. In both of those scenarios, it was about a month. With Luis Garcia going on to the IL right now, there is, again, a very real possibility that we do not see him for the rest of the season, which makes, if you take a look at it, the three pitchers that the Red Sox brought in to have an immediate impact on the Boston Red Sox essentially null and void. None of these guys are going to be making an impact on the Boston Red Sox anytime soon, and when they were making an impact, most of them weren't doing it very well. You're talking about three pitchers who were essentially a total fail in terms of production with this Red Sox team. That's 3/5 of the players you acquired at this year's deadline currently sitting on the IL, not being able to help this club win baseball games, which automatically makes this trade deadline more of a failure than it does a success. But there are still two other players. Danny Jansen is the only other player that the Red Sox acquired at this year's deadline that is currently making an impact at the major league level, and there are some good and bads here. The bad is that offensively, after a really hot start with the Boston Red Sox, has cooled off quite a bit. He's currently hitting .217 with a .308 on base percentage and a .348 slug in 16 games with the team for an 82 OPS plus. That is 17% below league average production. Not exactly fantastic at the plate. However, the reason I say there are some good and some bad here is because despite what Danny Jansen's doing at the plate for the Red Sox, behind it, he's been actually really solid. He continues to be one of the best blocking catchers in the entire sport, which is actually a really vital thing that the Red Sox could have used, considering Connor Wong right now is one of the worst in Major League Baseball at. In fact, Connor Wong has been one of the worst defensive catchers in Major League Baseball for a little bit now, and I don't think enough people are talking about the impact that that's having on games. His win probability added, which essentially says, hey, how does one individual player change the probability of the Red Sox winning baseball games, is currently the lowest on the team since the All-Star break. That's a pretty big negative value on Connor Wong because of his defense. Danny Jansen coming in here and having that defensive ability has helped this team quite a bit. You're marginally better at the plate than you were with Reese McGuire. So I don't think this portion of the deadline truly is a disaster. It's just not a true improvement for this big league club to the point that you wanted it to be, right? You wanted Danny Jansen to be that guy who sort of peppers the monster with a pull swing, and he hasn't really done that for you up to this point. However, again, it's not a true fail because, one, this is a guy that you could sit there and say, I don't think we've seen all Danny Jansen has to offer yet. He still has an entire month left of the 2024 season. There is a possibility that he finished out the season really strong, and this ends up being a win of a trade for this Red Sox team. Finally, the Red Sox acquired Quinn Priester, who really wasn't acquired for any impact on the 2024 club. He is currently in AAA, so he's not with the big league team, and to be honest with you, the stats don't look very good in his first four starts. It's a 7.88 ERA with a much lower 7.41 FIP, but at the same time too, I'm not all that worried about his statistics right now. We talked to Quinn. We made a video about Quinn. Right now, he is essentially revamping, retooling his entire arsenal. We talked about it. He's mechanically trying to get himself to consistently throw at higher velocities. He's working mechanically to change the pitch shapes on his slider, as well as utilize his sinker and changeup more than he ever has in the past. And obviously, that's going to come with a bit of a learning curve. I don't think 4 games is enough to break through that learning curve. He's also only 23 years old, and so for me, I don't really have an opinion on Quinn Priester yet. We're going to have to see how this one plays out over the next couple of years. There's a legitimate possibility that this trade isn't a true impact on the Boston Red Sox until the second half of 25, possibly even 26 as well. So this one is wait and see, but man, taking a look at this thing as a whole, it is not exactly a pretty picture right now. But before we get into that, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. Helps these videos out a ton, and it's the best way you can let me know you're enjoying the content we are putting out. Thank you all very much for taking a second to do it. So let's talk about this deadline as a whole. taking a look at this trade deadline in the aggregate, it doesn't look good, right? 3/5 of this trade deadline acquisitions are on the IL, and all of them were the pitchers that you brought in to have an immediate impact on this team. What you're essentially left with is the exact same position you were in as a staff before the trade deadline, which wasn't exactly a great position to be in to begin with. Your pitching staff is essentially exactly the same, adding in Chris Martin and Justin Slayton, who have actually been really solid for your team since coming back. But outside of that, you're in the same position. Most importantly, you're in the same position with your rotation. We've talked about this 1,000 times at this point, but the rotation is falling apart, not because they don't have the talent to be good, but because they don't have the experience and the arm strength, because they have not been built up over the entirety of a season before. You're talking about 3/5 of this rotation, if you include Cooper Criswell in this conversation, as first-year full-time starting pitchers. The other two in this rotation are Brian Bale, who's just in his sophomore season, Nick Pivetta, who's been consistently inconsistent his entire career. We knew that this was going to happen at some point for this Red Sox team, and the fact that you brought in James Paxton and he immediately got injured is not helping the cause at all. The bullpen continues to be rough. These guys, when they were healthy, certainly weren't helping all that much, but they were getting continuously better, and there was light at the end of the tunnel, especially with Luis Garcia, who was sort of turning into a legitimately high leverage reliever with the Boston Red Sox. Now you don't have either of those guys as well, and to be honest with you, I don't know how much I blame Greg Breslow here, because if you look back at what we thought of the deadline when it immediately happened, before these guys put on a Red Sox uniform, I would say for the most part, 95% of us were pretty satisfied with what Craig Breslow did at the deadline. The biggest critique was not who the Red Sox acquired, it was who the Red Sox didn't acquire. It was who the Red Sox could have gotten, but they didn't. It wasn't so much that we thought Luis Garcia and Lucas Sims were going to be as bad as they were coming into a Red Sox uniform. It was that there could have been better additions made. They did not do enough as much as we wanted them to do at this year's deadline. And a big reason for that is because they didn't want to part with any of their top prospect talent, which, looking back on it, feels like a pretty fair assessment to make, especially with how this Red Sox team has collapsed over the last couple of months. So I don't know if I entirely blame Craig Breslow for this one. It's going to be a little bit of a rough offseason for Breslow, considering his first deadline has been, it's an unmitigated disaster, right? It's absolutely terrible in terms of actual production. Your most impactful player right now is Danny Jansen, and that's just because he's marginally better than Reese McGuire. Everyone else is a complete non-factor, and it's a big reason why the Red Sox have been struggling since the trade deadline. Getting those guys in here and immediately having Paxton get hurt absolutely hurt this team. Having those guys in the bullpen not be able to perform the way you needed them to perform absolutely was a big factor as to what the Red Sox have done over this month of August. There's no arguing here. It is absolutely a disaster of a deadline for the Boston Red Sox, and Craig Breslow's first turn here as the CBO in terms of in-season trades certainly doesn't look all that great, but there's a lot of time here to make adjustments for Craig Breslow. There's a lot of time here for him to figure out the best way to approach trade deadlines. I'm not worried about Breslow in that front office position. I think for the most part, what this was just really terrible, miserable luck in a time where the Red Sox really couldn't afford miserable, terrible luck. So let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think? Do you think this is as big of a disaster as I'm making it out to be? Do you think it's actually not as bad as I'm making it out to be? And what are your thoughts on this year's deadline, looking back on it a month later? Let me know everything in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. Again, it just helps these videos out a ton, and it's the best way you can let me know you're enjoying the content. If you want to listen instead of watch these episodes, all you got to do is head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. And don't forget, we are going to be live tonight on this channel, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about all the latest Red Sox news and watching the Red Sox try to win a baseball game. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. I will see you tonight and in the Red Seats.